city that you would subsequently return many years later. Monsignor Ó Doibhlin, you shared your great love for the Irish language during your time as Professor of Modern Languages in Maynooth, a role that you fulfilled from 1958 until your retirement in 1996. Founding the Maynooth School of Literary Criticism in Irish in the 1960s. You are also an award-winning novelist and dramatist. Your story collection, Ní Máidín agus Tin Oíche, my apologies, won the Oireachtas Fiction Prize for your play In and Weir on Tugtha, set you in the plantation of Ulster just prior to the 1641 Rising, won the Abbey Theatre Award for Best Play in the Irish Language in 1993. Writer and academic Alan Titley compared you favourably with your fellow cleric Monsignor Pádraig de Brún, praising your unstinting efforts to make the Irish a modern language and thinking literature. You have also managed to reconcile your admiration of French literature and culture with the Irish language by translating the words of such French literary greats as Pascal and La Fontaine into Irish, as well as creating an anthology of Gaelic literature translated into French. Monsignor Ó Doibhlin, your love of Paris was rekindled when you were appointed by the late Cardinal Thomas O'Fee as rector of the Irish College, which was at that time a seminary for training priests for the church in Poland in 1984. Indeed, you served as secretary of the Fondation Irlandais Trust from 1991 to 2000, prior to the restoration and reopening of the Irish College as the Centre Culturel Irlandais in 2002. Such is the esteem in which you are held by the French government and the people that you were awarded the title of Officer of the Légion d'Honneur, the highest civilian award by the government of France, for your services to cultural relations between Ireland and France. I understand that the citation referred particularly to your restoration of the Irish College in Paris, the development of French studies in Maynooth, and your work translating the classics of French literature into the Irish language. Monsignor Ó Doibhlin, you have certainly had a busy and ultimately fulfilling life as an academic, but you have also, which is very important, equally as important, if not more important, given tremendous service to the Church over the last almost 6 decades as a priest. As a native of this district, we are extremely proud of all that you have achieved and that you are a wonderful ambassador for the parish of Bodoni and indeed this district. On behalf of Fermanagh and Ómós, to the promotion of the Irish language and your efforts to internationalise the language by translating works in languages other than English into Irish. Comhairle Fhear Manach.
Agini Wishle, Tahasar Amaven Shaw New, Leonard Ómós the Renewal, the Mhonsignor Breandán Ó Doibhlin New. As I was travelling to Derry this morning, I was thinking about Brendan's immense contribution to the people of the north of Ireland, and I suppose in short he has given a voice to our people, and he has, like the composers and arrangers of music for film, he has arranged and written the soundtrack to its landscape as well. It's a remarkable thing. I was looking at Brendan's curriculum vitae online and in printed form, and he was appointed Professor of French at the age of 28, which is a remarkable achievement. And as the Mayor pointed out, he retired as Professor of French in 1996. I was looking at a book that we produced in Derry under the auspices of the Gaeilge several years ago on Breandán Ó Doibhlin, Beatha agus Sihir, and there was a very interesting article in it by Ó Doibhlin, one of Brendan's former colleagues in Maynooth, and he recalled that on the 27th of October 1963 he preached in Maynooth Chapel on the 50th anniversary of the death of Owen O'Grana, and he preached on one particular part, one particular text, and it was Isaiah 58:12, and it seems that this has been, I suppose, a leitmotif for Brendan's life, and it says, "You will rebuild the ancient ruins, build up on old foundations. You will be called breach mender, restorer of ruined houses." And if I could move on then, the influences that have shaped Breandán are first of all Mhonsineoir, where he grew up in the last days of that Gaeltacht area of Mid-Ulster. And then when he went to Maynooth, then Professor Donoghue Flynn. And as Diarmuid Ó Doibhlin, my former colleague, our former colleague, said, that of course the great thing about O'Flynn was that he taught Sian Gaelic Emperor and tradition, Ahar Guhish ar Muintere. Irish is the medium of tradition. It is the key to the inheritance of our people. And then later on, that other great influence on him was that continental education, and it gave him that window on the world, and also it allowed him to shine a critical mirror up against the Gael. His achievements are numerous and in all cases full of depth, and the Mayor has pointed that out. There, first of all, he's Ba'ur Shkele, he was a novelist. Bagramadore, he was a playwright. Baliervastore, a literary critic. Agus Idje Skull Critica of Ion. He was a guru of a whole new school of literary criticism. Ba'ashtror, he was a translator. Ba'Homsihort Litriachta, hÓmaí. He was an anthologist of Irish literature from various periods in both verse and prose. Ba'Hraftere dhúchas. He was a commentator on the nexus between culture, language, and civilization. Agus Marduru Rivinshaw, we share Gunadildini, Wani Choláiste Gaelach. He played a pivotal role in the regeneration of the Irish College in Paris, a great achievement by all accounts. And as already has been said, he was an author of a number of novels, two very important novels, possibly two of the most important, well, other than the writings of O'Kane, these are the most important books of the second half of the 20th century. Níl agus Tine Iche from 1964, and then in Branner gan Chur. And as was again mentioned before, he produced a play in, I think it was 1994, 1995. I was out of the country at that time, and the play was Níon Weir an Uachta, the daughter of the steward of, I suppose in this case of the bell. One of the things that strikes me about Breandán's work is that there is that great connection with that world of the early 19th century, and the kind of thing that Sean O'Donovan was interested in when he was writing his Ordnance Survey letters. And he talks about being with Ómós in County Derry, who was the keeper of the bell there. And all of this stuff, of course, is transmitted to us by Breandán. And as we said earlier on, a translator of texts from French, also translations of Irish, of the Bible and the Catechism into Irish. Above all else, probably he'll be remembered in future generations as the leading figure in the movement of modern Irish criticism. And he wrote the standard texts for all university students in Irish, Aiscí Critica agus Cultúr, in 1974, and the second volume in 1997. And in doing that, he gave us a whole new way of thinking about Irish literature, a whole new way of writing about that literature as well. As a critic himself, his analysis of the work of Sorna McGillian and his rereading of Tréna Killia will stand the test of time. Two things are very important in the work of Breandán Ó Doibhlin, and the first one is the meaning of tradition, and the second is the repossession of our literary heritage. And he has discussed the concept of what tradition means, and if anyone that was growing up here in the 1980s, we heard 2 traditions, 3 traditions. By the end of the 80s and 90s, you could have thought that there might have been 10 traditions. But the reception, it's the reception of the raw materials of a community's identity from its forebears. It's about the handing on process and the critical examination of that inheritance. And it is the reshaping of that inheritance according to the needs of current generations. And Breandán then has taken it a step further, and he has remarked that it's about ensuring the survival of that which is meaningful. And finally also, the avoiding of putting ourselves in a bondage to a dead past. The second major theme, I think, in his work has been the reposition of a literary heritage. And underlying that is the transformative power of literature. And this allows us to repossess the essence of ourselves. And in that, of course, we begin to be at peace with ourselves and the world. And beyond that, I think at a deeper level, there is something coming from his own professional background, vocational background as a priest, that we should be givers rather than takers. And in that work then, he produced two very important, well, a series of very important volumes, a manual of Irish literature, Manual Literacht na Gaeilge, and there's a whole series of them going from earliest times, and I'm not sure whether we're at what the latest one was, but I've been using the ones for the 17th century and the 18th century. And in that we rediscovered the Gaeltacht of the mind, that is our inherited memory. Another important text that I've been using with my students is his pamphlet on Choláiste Gaelach, in defense of humanity. And at the heart of that then he considers the contribution made by Ireland to the shared European heritage within the globalized world. And I'd like to read a little bit of a translation by Mhaigh Nuad from that particular pamphlet, because I think we can learn a lot from it, particularly in the current era. And he says here, in an era of individualism, we wish to see everyone cherished equally. At a time when the notion of self-sacrifice in the cause of the common good is rejected, let us speak of our obligation to the historic nation and our ancestors. When all the talk is about the global picture, let us remind people of the small island community. When the ruling elite speak of efficiency and competitiveness, high-tech and investment, the Irish person's concern must be the identity of the person and the people and the continuity of their historical memory. And finally, again, when I was driving this morning, I was listening to a rehashed version of the song which Róisín Grian of Aaron Moore sang, she who was hired in Donamana. And she says, at the beginning of the song in Clarbog Jail, she says, Léhin leor Gaeilge agus canúint wai chrúi, scrífin in a dhéisian le bar mo fin. So I would read Irish books containing difficult registers, and then I would write with my pen. And finally then, I would just like to consider a little bit of his work in that very important novel, Níl Maidin agus Chinnaíche and Chin. What he does, I think, is he allows us to regain a sense of ourselves, and I'd like to read a little bit from that particular text, and I have both the translation and the original Irish text, and Aoife will play some nice music for us when we think about this. He says, Tá fecha agam ó bhliain go chéile, meitheal fearr ag genuan over, tíú hald an óin os cór mo hairse amach, ag obair leá go grí tróna agus neoin bhaig go níriú geala na gunla, le tarú na séisiir de chur daisce, agus a gúine an chibhrin, a leatíú an seanine, a thuail go féineach, a bhéire tríine ag ligean na suagan, an tan bhí a garwach a casú dá, bailí dóibh, an ús agus an áige, álaí agus altraman, ag seanachas le chéile, agus suagan a snífa a gó nascú. Is álaí dúsa freisin, an seo a ghim a gliana, a tarint as ma heisce, a der hen is nua. Dairim ma phobal an star, a fuirma an alad, a múlú, a go goáil, a ligan sugain, sugan a duhish. From year to year, I have observed a team of men harvesting across the river, opposite my front door, working hard through evening and after nightfall, when the harvest moon has risen. to store away the fruit of the seasons, and an old man aside in a corner of the field, his patient eye and practiced fingers plying out the sugan rope, while his grandson spins for him. So they were, age and youth, sage and pupil, sharing tales, the sugan of their spinning, binding them together. So it is with me, here in the centre of my glen, drawing from my store of old and new, and I disseminate among my people the riches I got from of old, teaching them, shaping them, binding them together, plying out the sugan rope, the sugan of my heritage.
My dear friends, I refuse to be formal in a company like this because I don't feel that it's the formality of the occasion which is important at all. I can be formal, or I can be serious, or I can be humorous about these occasions. And I better do my duty first before I wander off. My first duty, of course, is to offer my warmest thanks to Mary, the chairperson of the Tyrone and Omagh District Council, for her warm and carefully thought out words to me. I wasn't too sure listening to her that it was the same person at all. Maybe the services of the Tyrone and Omagh District Council had handed her the wrong briefing card and she might have been talking about somebody else. But I rallied myself anyway and followed it. And she was, of course, far too generous, naturally. Wait till I come to Peadar too, he was too generous as well. But I'll explain why as I go along. Because you see, like anybody who was ever involved in teaching, once you get up on your hind legs, you can't be got down. Like a bad preacher, he buzzes the airfield several times before he manages to land. I deeply appreciated what Mary said about my imaginative roots in Monterone. First off, I'm very much obliged at the way in which that term Monterone has regained new life in recent years, because it was a completely dead concept in my youth, and people always talked about the Sperrin Mountains. Well, to the best of my information, the word Sperrin was invented by a landlord's daughter in 1820 and first appeared in a newspaper at that time, because the upper classes of those days, who didn't have very much to do in the way of work, used to spend wet Sunday evenings renaming the barbarous titles of the Gaelic landscape. And to that you have Bessie Bell and Mary Gray and Sperrin and Pomeroy and many another one. And it's deeply satisfying to me to see them coming back. Mary was perfectly right in saying that my imaginative landscape is that of those glens that we call Monterone or Montcherligny. And all the place names and whatever books I wrote all mirror that. People will think they spot them somewhere else, but they're not. They're all out above Rúscaigh, and you'll find them in townlands like Binnefrahan, up Glenelly and so forth. I can go on and on. The one other thing from Mary's beautiful words that I would like to mention is she talked about my involvement with the Irish College in Paris, and the only thing I want to say about that is that this is the oldest Irish intellectual and educational institution we have. It's about 25 years older than Trinity College in Dublin, which of course was, I'm afraid, founded not for the good of the Irish religion. And that college is now set up in the form of a charitable institution. This is, by the way, this is the little bit of advertisement, but forgive it. It's a charitable institution which can't be confiscated by either the French or the Irish government. I don't trust either too much. But what the main point of it is that it is 50 ensuite rooms available to any student who can produce an Irish passport, north or south. And in a crowded city like Paris, That is a very real thing. If you know young people who have to do time in France or that, they would all be welcome there, and that's the reason why it was founded. Anyway, thanks again to Mary for all those words and for the care which she went to in preparing it, just as the care as a parent in the entire organisation of this this occasion. I can't pass it by without alluding to the harp music, which I found in the very best of good taste and played with great feeling indeed. And even though I was diverted by everything from photographs to speeches, it was all there, providing the essential background of it all. Just before I sat down, and you know, when you see a clergyman heading for a reading desk or a pulpit, always count the number of pages he has. Thankfully, I've only one charge. I want to pay tribute to my colleague in the university, Peadar Mac Gabhann, who's normally known to me in the academic circuit, who has excelled himself in his kind words and his detailed praise of what he claims I have done in a rather misspent life. I could, of course, you know, as people in universities do, always deconstruct the entire operation. And we can take all the things he said and showed you a very, very different side. He paid tribute to me for being appointed Professor of French in Maynooth College at the age of 28 or something. The reason was, of course, I was just appointed. They appointed in those days quite independently of any merit. And the only reason I ever got as far as learning foreign languages anyway was because I was fired out of Maynooth College the first day. Had to emigrate to Rome to get finished. Just by way of thanking Peadar, because it's easy to use empty words, but I'm very appreciative of the trouble he went to in analysing things I have done. I don't think they're as important as he would claim, but anyway, they're done, and that's all we can say. Continuing the same vein, I mean, he paid tribute to me for founding a school of literary criticism, and actually, in fact, when you look close at that, that was mostly done by postgraduate students. As Peadar will agree with, many a university professor and international expert rears his reputation on the basis of the groundwork done by his postgraduates. So that's, I could nearly scrub that one. The one thing I would like to say before I sit down, and it's high time I did sit down, before I forget, first of all, is to thank each and every one of you for giving yourselves the trouble of coming here. There are many things people can be doing in this short life, and yet you've all, as I say, put yourselves out to come here and all to listen to me talking, which is not necessarily a pleasure for anybody. So therefore, a profound and heartfelt thanks. I want to thank also my niece and nephew down there who have given themselves the trouble of coming some distance to make sure I got here in one piece, because since I left home, the place has changed that much. I didn't know where the Grange was. Can you believe that? I couldn't find my way there. And well, I won't get into that because that'll take me on a long way. By way of a final remark, I just want to say that if there's anything I would say to you as representatives of the community in these counties, is I think in this era when, if you like, and I must be careful, clergy should never get into politics, but in an era when a great deal of political water has flown under the bridges, we may be in an era now where the problems and the challenges will be in a cultural field. This is particularly true in the whole European situation. And funnily enough, in Europe, which I've had some dealings with in Brussels, one of the problems with the Irish who come here and are treated, come there and are treated as an independent nation, and so have a full crack of the whip and so on. But many people there feel, and have to be persuaded of the opposite, that the Irish are somehow too close to England and the United Kingdom. And there's somewhere or another, because we speak English, we're just a province of theirs. And somewhere deep down, you see, they have, like all of us, they have this profound suspicion of what's going on in British diplomacy. somewhere or another there's a deep dark plot here that the Irish will do their dirty running and the English will come in after them. And that's purely and simply because we tend to be identified as purely English speakers. And our government of Dublin are always at pains to tell everybody that we're an English-speaking nation who can actually do business in English. Well, I mean, did you ever hear a Dane speaking English? It put us to shame. Or a Dutchman. That's no boast anymore. What is important is that we have some sense of our own identity. And that is carried by as much of the Irish language as you can absorb or use or identify with. Now, let's not be impractical. There's no point in pretending that everybody's going to wake up tomorrow morning speaking Irish. It doesn't happen, it won't happen. But most people can cherish it. They can cherish the climate and the landscape in which they live, which is marked with it all the time. They can learn, for example, the couple of dozen words which will illuminate the place names you live among. I mean, we are the only people in Western Europe who live in a landscape that we can't understand. It's only when you go elsewhere you realise that people actually know what the places mean that they're travelling through. We don't. And it's profound alienation. We're living almost as neo-colonials in our own country. Now, forgive me, I have, as usual, committed a double sin. The preacher is launched on a sermon, and the former university teacher has given a lecture. To scrub the both, we take the remarks for what they're worth. The main thing is to take very serious what I want to say, that I'm deeply impressed by all of your self-sacrifice, really, in coming here to give me this handsome award, which I have barely mentioned, and to listen to me telling you how you should be living your lives. None of those things are of the first importance, but what is of importance is that in spite of what the Gospel says about a prophet never being honoured in his own country, this is an exception, and I'm deeply sensible of that. Thank you all again, and thanks for coming along, and my thanks to you who represent the community of Fermanagh and Tyrone. Fermanagh and Ómós, yeah. There's a bit of a bigotry there in me. Thank you all again. Anyway, and safe home on your way home. God bless you.